And we're going to be making pâte feuilletée, which is puff pastry, but an easy version of that. So if you guys will, go ahead, grab your butter that's in the refrigerator if you've already got it, so that it warms up just a tiny bit. So American refrigerators are much colder than the ones in France. So I want y'all's butter to just warm up a tiny bit. So I'm going to grab mine too. And while that is warming up, I will give you guys a little intro into everything that we're going to be doing today. So like I said, it's the simple version. The traditional version can take between 2 and 3 days to make, just because of the resting time. And also you have to be really careful about temperatures. So the temperature of your dough and the temperature of what is called a butter block. So the butter block is essentially what creates all of those beautiful layers. So pâte means dough, feuilleté means layers, okay? So to describe it, imagine that this is my piece of dough, okay? I've rolled it out into a big rectangle and I'm gonna plop a big rectangle of butter in the center, okay? This is the traditional way. You fold the dough around the butter, encasing it, and then you roll it out and you fold it. So you fold it essentially like you would a letter, okay? There's a couple of different kinds of folds. We'll be going over those today. But what happens is then with those folds, you get layers of dough and butter and so forth. When you put them in the oven, the layers of butter, they melt, they create steam, and that's what separates the layers of dough and creates the height and the flakiness and the butteriness that we all love, okay? We're going to be doing big blocks of butter instead of a big block, right? Big chunks of butter instead, okay? This means that we don't have to be so careful about the temperature. We do want this butter to remain really nice and cold, okay? But we don't have to be careful about the temperature to dough temperatures, if that makes sense, okay? So that kind of removes that. All right, are you guys ready? Yeah? Excellent. I had a class just before this, actually, and we made, I'll show you when we have a little break what we made, but it was a cheesecake apple caramel tart. It's kind of a mixture between America and France. And this is what we're going to be making today, the Palmier. Really beautiful with some apple butter on the inside, so I've made some in advance, so you guys don't have to wait for the cooking time. And we're gonna get going. All right, so I'm gonna switch over to my overhead camera here. There we go. And you guys will notice it's very simple, okay? So we have flour, we have water. This is in my French onion soup bowl. And we have our butter, okay? So remember, butter in really big tablespoon-sized chunks, okay? So our first step is we're going to take a little bit of salt. I keep forgetting that this is my fleur de sel container, but that's okay. A big pinch in there. If you forget it, it's not the end of the world. You can make this recipe with salted butter as well, and if you're doing that, you want to leave out the salt, obviously, okay? So you're not adding double salt. So we're going to be making this by hand. You want to use a nice clean hand. Mix in that salt there, okay? And if you guys have any questions, I'm keeping an eye on that chat there, so is Natasha, so feel free. I love questions. I love chatting. I'm going to add the butter in there. Okay, so all of those big chunks of butter. And we're going to start by tossing that butter in the flour. Okay. So this is starting with an initial coating of those butter pieces, which is going to make it easier for us to incorporate it into the dough. Now, for our pieces of butter, we actually want to make these a little bit easier to work in as well, okay? So we've coated them with flour. Now we're actually going to physically press them into sheets, okay? So if your butter is really cold, which mine is, right, and it breaks into maybe some smaller pieces, stuff like that, that is okay because you still will have a massive amount of butter in this. If you guys noticed, if you looked at the weight measurements, it is equal parts of flour and butter. Oh yes. And this is not even doing the butter block, you guys. Okay.
That's a lot of butter.
It's a lot of butter, but it makes for an amazing, amazing crust here. You can use this puff pastry recipe for anything sweet or savory, okay? So I actually use it for millefeuille as well, a base for Saint-Honoré, all sorts of things, right? So,
Oh, I love millefeuille, yes.
me
And so
too.
the butter was chilled in the fridge, right? And
Yep.
then you left it outside for just a little bit to make it a little bit softer,
Just a
right?
little bit, yeah. So we could have left it out for maybe 1 more minute, so it's a little bit easier, a little bit more malleable to work with, but we'll be fine. And this will actually make for a nice cold dough too. So what you really need to look out for with your puff pastry is if your butter starts to get warm and melts, then the problem is that it creates a dough all by itself, okay? So look, this is the perfect temperature for butter. Look, I'm pressing it. It's not breaking into pieces. It's going into a nice little sheet there. It must have warmed up as I did the other ones. Do you see? Okay. So that is really just simulating that big butter block that we would put in the middle traditionally, okay? Yum! So once you guys have gotten through all of those, your next step is going to be to toss them again, okay? And then we're going to slowly start adding that water. Julie, great question. So will it work for croissant as well? This one will not, okay? So croissant, it uses a yeasted puff pastry, okay? So you would need to add yeast into this, but it would be a very similar process in terms of rolling it out and doing the folds to create the layers. So for puff pastry, because there is no yeast, it is crisp, okay? For croissant, when you add yeast, it's soft with the layers, okay? So that is the difference there. Also proofing time. Well, what you do with yeast, right? There we go. Okay, so how's everyone doing? Butter is mixed in?
Great. And can you tell us more what kind of recipes you can make? What are your favorite maybe you make with la pâte feuilletée? You mentioned millefeuille. Anything savory?
Should I show you? Here, I'll get my cookbook and I'm going to show you because I have a couple here. So, okay, well, this is obviously not with puff pastry, but this is one of my favorite desserts. Lemon tart. I don't have the pages memorized yet, you guys, so I have to just flick through. I'm not doing this on purpose. Okay, so what I really like is, oh, here we go. So it has your pictures in the book, which is really nice. I love making this dessert. This is called the Saint-Honoré. Saint-Honoré is the patron saint of bakers in France. And this is the cake that they make. So puff pastry on the bottom, you can see this is the puff pastry that we're making today. I call it a simple puff pastry, but you can call it a rough puff as well. So if you watch the Great British Baking Show, you might have seen that. Okay. But this is a little bit different. There's millefeuille, 1,000 layers. And another favorite is this one here, the galette de roi. Okay, so this is something that they only serve here in France in January. And there's different versions. And this one in particular, you see more in the north part of France, and there's a frangipane on the inside. And it is, oh, so delicious. So that would be the things that I love to make with it. You could absolutely, so Dawn is saying, will this work for wrapping things like beef Wellington or pork tenderloin? Absolutely. So you can use this recipe for sweet and savory. As you've noticed, we haven't added any sugar. Okay, so there we go.
Molly, may I say that I love how your cookbook is laid out, that you focus on the technique, and then you talk about the desserts that go around that technique. I think it's just so intuitive and it's brilliant. Well done.
Thank you so much. I actually, the publisher reached out the other day and we're submitting the book for a James Beard Award. So cross your fingers for me.
That's so exciting.
Yes, congratulations.
Croisez les doigts. Yeah. That would be so amazing.
Et les oreilles.
Oh, we'll see. Yeah, send all the good thoughts my way. That would be, I posted my Instagram. I think I would faint if that happened. So I would be like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so we'll see. So for this year, the authors have to submit a portion as well. So usually it's just the publisher. So I just finished writing it up yesterday. So we shall see. That would be amazing. Okay.
Croise les doigts. Yes.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Send all the good thoughts. So I just added a drizzle of water. I like to do it by the tablespoon so you can really keep track of how much your water you're adding. Okay. And then we're going to toss this in. Okay. So just tossing it, and that way you're not touching that butter too much so it doesn't warm up. Okay. And we're adding it a little bit at a time so we have control over how much we actually add, okay? So this is the thing, is that flour has different hydration points. So even if you've bought this from the grocery store, you know, you've gotten like King Arthur flour or gold medal. I actually tested all of my recipes with gold medal flour that my mom sent from the US. I think she sent me 10 pounds. It actually is going to change by season because those wheat grains are going to change by season as well. So those hydration points are going to change. And so it's important to, each time that you add it, don't add a fixed amount of water. Instead, add it little by little. Okay. So I think I've done about 4 tablespoons, I would say. And
someone is asking about the temperature of water. Is it just room temperature?
Oh, great question, Allison. So cold, really nice and cold. If you live in a warmer environment, you want to put some ice cubes in there, okay? But just make sure that you don't add the actual ice cubes into your dough, okay? Because that would mean for pockets of water, and we don't want that. So cold water, and that helps to keep the butter cold as well. Dawn, preferred flour, all-purpose or bread flour? I always use King Arthur. I am actually using a flour. I wish I had a bag handy because it's a fun bag to look at. Oh, I have their flyer. Here, I can show you the flyer that they have. It is from the Moulin de Versailles. Moulin means mill. And it's family run, so this is the guy that is running it right now since 1905. So I'm using a local flour, which is kind of cool. It is right by the train station. This is what it looks like. And they use a mixture of old and new techniques to make their flour. And all of the grain that is used is within, I believe, 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers. It's very close by. So that did not answer your question, Dawn, I realize, but you can use all-purpose. All of my recipes are tested with all-purpose, and they work great with that. But if you happen to have a mill nearby, I don't know if they have one in Washington, D.C., that's kind of cool to use too. Protein content on the lower end, I can't remember exactly for this, but it doesn't matter, right? Because you're adding your water little by little. Okay, so for this, once we've added about 4 tablespoons, we want to just kind of crunch this together, scrunch it together, and just see how it holds a ball. So obviously mine's very, very dry still, okay? So for that, I'm going to add a whole nother tablespoon of water. If though you're only getting a little kind of just little dry parts in there, you're just going to drizzle in a couple drops of water, okay? So I'm just swirling and scrunching. Do you see how I'm kind of pressing against the side of the bowl there too? And I'm just seeing how it holds together. And I've got a nice ball going on, right? But I also have a lot of dry pieces, and this itself looks very dry as well too. So I'm just going to add a couple of drops of water. So this is where you have a lot of control over it, okay? And I'm going to do that same thing, and you want to avoid touching it a lot. So I'm trying to take as big of a scoop as I can, swirl that around, press it together, okay? And bring that together into a dough, okay? So there's my dough with the massive chunks of butter in it. Bonus. I'm gonna actually turn this over, and with a clean finger, so if you need to rub a little bit of dough off your hands, do like what's called a baker's wash, you're gonna touch the top, okay? Kind of rub your finger across it and feel, does it feel kind of powdery or dusty, okay? Or does it feel good, kind of in neutral, or does it feel sticky or slimy? And this is how we determine if we've added enough water. So mine in particular, and you can see it's cracking a tiny bit. That doesn't really bother me that much actually. It is a tiny bit dry on top. I can feel a little bit of a little powdery consistency. So I'm just gonna add 2 little drops on top. That's it, okay? A little bit of water goes a very long way. I'm just gonna scrunch that in and I should be good to go, okay? Now, if your dough feels sticky, that is most likely your butter, which is getting warm, okay? So at that point, you wanna wrap it up in plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge, okay? So we're gonna do that for all of them. But if you're like, Molly, it feels really slimy, then that means that you have added way too much water, okay? And you can correct that by just sprinkling a little bit of flour across the top, okay? So for our dough, this is gonna go into the refrigerator for about 15 minutes or so, okay? We'll chat while that's happening, and also I'm gonna go over the folds too, so you get that kind of a little bit before we start doing them, okay? And you wanna stick this into the refrigerator so it has a nice even chill. I like using the freezer sometimes to speed things up, but you don't wanna use it in this instance because it will get too cold around the edges and you won't have a nice even roll when you go to actually do that. So I'm gonna pop mine in the refrigerator. I'll be right back. So if there's any questions, stick them in the chat there.
Great, first step done. And speaking of butter
Exactly.
itself, is it important? Do you have your favorite brands, or does it turn out differently depending on what butter you use? Have you ever experienced that, or is it not? It's not that important.
Oh, okay. So I think I heard your question. Were you talking about different butter brands?
Yes, like what's your favorite? And I was thinking about the result. Does it depend on what kind of butter you're using? Did you see different results using different butters, something like that?
Definitely. So the fat content of the butter can make a difference. So salted butter is naturally going to have a higher fat content, but also the quality of the butter itself. So I go for Président when I'm here, President, because it works really well. It's a good middle of the range butter. It's not so expensive that I can't do a ton of baking, which if you saw how much butter I went through on a weekly basis, you would know. I go through probably about 3 to 4 kilos of butter, so about 8 pounds of butter a week.
Wow.
Yeah, depending on what I'm doing. So you really want to have like a good middle of the range butter. If you're really getting into it, so Plugra is a really good one that you can get your hands on in the US. Also, Trader Joe's actually has a European style butter that is quite good too in the States. So you can check those out. But when I'm here, the other thing I would say about butter is, oh yeah, there you go, Don. So you can get President or Kerrygold at Whole Foods. Ashir is, oh gosh. Okay, I personally reserve that for like a really good like tartine in the morning, personally. That is really good butter. So is Bourdieu. Those I just reserved those guys for like when I want that pure, like just eating it just as is melted. But a key, and this is interesting, of how you can tell if the butter is good or not is by obviously the taste, but the smell as well. So if you've ever, I don't know, I've done this. I don't know if anyone else has, but bought a couple of different brands of butter and smelled them. They smell very different, okay? So it's like wine, terroir. So the actual wine where the grapes are grown makes a huge difference on the flavor, right? So it's the same thing with all of our produce, including butter, right? So where the cows are grazing, if they're eating, wildflowers versus hay, if they're in a really green pasture versus, I don't know, in Texas where it's really, dry, that makes a big difference. Okay, so the quality of the actual cows and et cetera, et cetera.
I wonder
Oh
if
my
you can
gosh.
do a butter tasting sometime.
Yeah, there's actually, so Bourdieu in Brittany, they have what's called a butter museum, and you can actually do butter tasting. And they have different flavors. They have like seaweed, ouzo, vanille, framboise, all sorts of things. So I have not gone yet, but it is on the list.
Right, absolutely, yes. So Molly, tell us more about your story. You have such an inspiring story. You abandoned your totally different digital marketing career back in Texas and followed your heart. You moved to France to study pastry, and now voila, you're doing your own pastry classes. So tell us how it all started, and when did you realize that patisserie, bakery is your passion you want to follow?
Oh my gosh, it started at a really, really young age. I'm going to answer the questions really quick. So Claudia is asking an alternative to plastic wrap. I would use beeswax paper. That works great. There's also, I have a couple of these. Let's see if I can get them easily. Da, da, da. Maybe not. Oh yes, I do. Ha ha ha. I have some of these that look like shower caps that you can put over the bowls. So you can do that too. Wax paper, but you do want it to actually be covered or it will dry out. Okay. And then, oh my gosh, Natasha. Oh, okay, how do you pronounce that? Bird Disney? I'm pronouncing it totally wrong. That is, yes, it is delicious. Yes. There you go, Stephanie, beeswax coated cloth for sure. Done, and the US salted butter is lower quality. That's why they put the salt in it to mask the taste. Oh, there you go. Keep an eye out for that one. I love it, Don. Watch out. But yeah, so Natasha, to answer your question, so I have always loved to bake ever since I was really little. Maybe the age of Anina's little kid there who is so cute. They're matching. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I baked with my mom constantly. That was our hobby. That was our activity. And when I started getting older, I actually was memorizing recipes and cooking on my school breaks. And that was how my mom kept me occupied, was with butter in the refrigerator and flour in the pantry. And I just absolutely loved it. Then I went to college, and I actually thought that I had to go into a 9-to-5 job, just because of how I was raised and the environment around me, right? The people that I knew. So I didn't even think about going into a restaurant career or a bakery, things like that. In France, it's a very different feel for those sorts of jobs. In France, it's very much an artisanal task. Which is very highly valued. And in the States, I don't feel like it's as respected as it should be sometimes. And so maybe that's part of the reason, or probably I didn't have anyone in my family, that was in it. But I went to Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, TCU, go Horned Frogs. And I went and I studied marketing, and I graduated with my major in marketing and a minor in advertising and public relations. And yeah, I worked in marketing for 7 years, and I absolutely loved it. I loved looking at Excel on a daily basis. I was managing a team of 6 people. Honestly, I could have continued in that path and done really well. But one day, I don't know, I just was like, it was part of one of those little branching points where either I become a higher level manager or I start looking at something else. And if I'd taken that higher position, then it would have been a lot more difficult to step back. And so I actually moved back home to my parents, saved up for a year, did back and forth. So an hour, 2-hour round trip drive every day, and applied to go to school at the Cordon Bleu. And when I was there, I just fell in love with France. and fell in love with the culture, the food, going to the markets, obviously the pastries, and decided to make it my career. So when I moved back, so my visa ended, I actually went in between my marketing job and my pastry job for a year to make sure that that's what I really wanted to do. It was all, I'm a very planning person. I think this is probably a pastry characteristic. It was very methodical, the change into it. It was very slow because I wanted to make sure that I had a good base before I made the complete switch. And if something went wrong, I could always go back to marketing. So I had a very supportive company, which was really nice. And yeah, worked freelance for several years, worked at several different bakeries and a school. And then we moved to Versailles, and I made teaching my full-time passion, and it's been fantastic. So really love it.
Hey, yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Someone says that it all helps on your current career, and I guess indeed your website is amazing. Your social media very tempting to just I agree. Someone is asking here along, do you give classes in person right now?
Yeah, I do. So last week I had 4 in-person classes. Really fun. So I will show you guys. I'll put away my shower cap.
I love it. What's the name? What's the official baking name for the shower cap?
It's just yeah. I bet you it is based on like a pattern for a shower cap too. I got it at, so the brand is Now Designs, and the inside, it has a lining that's easy to wash, which is kind of cool. But I got it at this shop. It's called Etienne Market. It's in Dallas, and they have all sorts of really cute things. So yes, but to answer Natasha's question, so I do in-person classes and I do online. So online I do about 4 a week. So I just finished a class making this tart. So it's, oh yeah. And there's some caramel sauce behind there. My box of 18 eggs, which I usually have at least 2 a week. And here is where I teach. Here we go. So it's oh, well, you said this in the entry. It's an 18th century apartment. Oh, and here comes my dog. Very slowly. Come on, Elliot. Nope.
Elliot, hello. Bonjour. Which language does he speak?
He speaks both. So he knows like some commands in English and some in French. So like he knows attends and sit. And now he knows down too, because we had some pet sitters come over that were very passionate about training dogs, and so they taught him down. So it's very exciting.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah.
So do we still have some time? The dough is still chilling, right?
I would say like 5 more minutes, probably.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So can you do you think you could have had the same career in America? Or you mentioned how different it is, and I agree with the attitude and even with the time, I guess people are dedicated to devote to this kind of things, right? And get a full-fledged education to become a pastry chef. So do you think you could have had the same career in the US? That's my first question. And maybe if you have some time to tell us, what was it like navigating your first years in France? I believe it was not easy.
Oh, yeah. So to answer the first question, could I have had the same career? Yes, absolutely. It would have been very different though. So it would have probably more looked like teaching at a bakery. So something like that. I've got flour in my hair. There we go. It's the trick of the trade, right?
Love it. Yes.
Yeah. And so I worked at several places in Dallas actually, and it really does depend where you're working, which is true in any country, in terms of, how things are going in the kitchen, what you learn. It's very common to move around from a lot of different jobs in kitchens. So you really do take a job for about a year and then move on to the next one, because you learn everything at that pastry shop, bakery, restaurant, right? And then you're ready to move on and learn more. So it's a very cool career where you're constantly learning. So from your colleagues or just by making things, right? And discovering, oh, it's a little bit better if I do this. you know? Or, oh, this genoise cake, this was last week, the genoise cake with the chocolate, it's way better with just one more egg added to it. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of science involved. But yeah, and then the other question about my first couple of years in France, oh, it's so hard. What I like to tell people is that France really makes you work for it. So with my visa applications, and then for my first year too, it really was, gosh, it was very overwhelming. So even leaving the apartment, I was like, oh my gosh, completely different stratosphere, right? And going to the post office was really funny the first couple of years, right? So just kind of figuring out the boxes and everything. Because here's like how I like to describe it is that all of those little cultural things, you know, how to act in certain environments, going to the post office, right? All of those little things you learn from your parents when you're young, right? And so when you move to a different country, you're relearning those at whatever age that you're at. And it's a little overwhelming. So I like to describe it how my mom does. So when you have a little newborn, right? And they won't sleep, you take them for a walk and all of the sounds, all of the colors are so overwhelming that they fall asleep, right? So it was kind of like that for the first year, but it was incredible. So you're just taking in so much new information and discovering a new culture, but also trying to remain open to it and really leaning into the differences and how amazing that they can be. And yes, it was hard, Stephanie. Yeah, and the prefecture is always very difficult. But there was someone asking about...
Someone was asking about who's on the front cover of your book. That was a great question, yes.
Okay, I have a little, this is so funny. I have a lot over here. I'll show you guys this in our next break, which won't be as long, by the way. These are little Marie Antoinette. Aren't they cute? So I have a lot of them. And they're just busts because what they were used for are dolls. So you would put a dress on them like this, you see? So I don't know how old this one is, but you would use it as a pincushion, a jewelry box, or just a little box to put something in, which is kind of cool. And yeah, so I use them for my desserts because it's so amazing. She's always leaning on something, right? So she can lean on a macaron or some whipped cream. It's really great fun. Okay, so
Very
we're
cute.
gonna grab, yeah, thank you. We're gonna grab our dough out of the refrigerator. We're gonna do the first fold, and then depending on how chilled our dough is, we might run into and just do our second fold as well. We'll see. So I just popped my screen back there. I'm gonna grab my dough. Ooh, lovely. So mine feels nice and firm. What I like to say is in between each of these folds, which we will be doing 3, it's a good idea to have this chill for about 15 to 20 minutes. We're gonna do a little bit of a sped up version today so that you guys aren't waiting for too long. And the more that you chill this, the better those layers are going to be. Okay, the more defined they will be because that allows that butter to chill. It allows that dough to rest as well. So I'm putting some flour on the surface, some flour on top of my puff pastry dough there. And I'm going to add some to our rolling pin too. So you guys see, I just put a little bit on the palm of my hand there. Natasha, do you chill the dough in the freezer or the refrigerator? Definitely the refrigerator, for sure. If the dough is still soft, does that mean it needs to chill more? Yeah, so mine's a little bit soft. It could chill a little bit longer, but we will still be able to do our first roll there, so we will have no problem. What you want to do is keep some flour nearby because what will happen for pretty much everyone, I will guarantee, is that butter will show through as we're rolling, okay? and it will be sticky, okay? So if, you know, that butter shows through and it's sticky, it's going to stick to your surface, it's going to stick to your rolling pin. And so you want to actually pat some flour on top. So I actually had that happen just now. Can you guys see? So right here, it looks a little bit sticky or tacky to the surface. So you just put a little bit of flour on top. Make sure that you hold, you know, pick up that dough, you know, every once in a while, move it around on your surface there, okay? And then that way, that bottom is going to remain nice and coated. In terms of how thin we are rolling this, it actually does not make a huge difference. What makes a difference is we just want to be able to fold this, okay? So I like to tell people just roll this out, nice long rectangle. Does not have to be a perfect rectangle. And you want it to be about 2 hands long. So I know everyone's hands are different, but that's okay. This is, remember, the simple version with amazing results, okay? So we want to make this easy. We want to make it to where it's thin enough so that you can actually fold it, okay? So my dough is a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch, I'd say. It's close to 1/4 inch, okay? If you guys are noticing, I am patting my dough every once in a while if I want, just to help it be a little bit straighter with those edges. And once it is 2 hands long, we can go into those folds, okay? So we're gonna do the first fold here, and the first fold is just like folding a piece of paper to go into an envelope, okay? Exactly the same approach. So this is called a single fold as well. You're gonna take the bottom and go up 1/3. Okay, remember you've got your long rectangle envelope. How would you fold your paper? You would fold it in thirds, right? So half up. If you've got a lot of flour on there, so just brush it off. If you happen to have a nifty brush, this is a great time to use it. I have 3. Okay, and then you're gonna take the top and bring it down to meet the bottom, okay? So here we go, I'll show it one more time. You can always adjust, right? So the bottom up 1/3, and then the top down to meet the bottom, okay? So that is the first fold. You can see it's starting to resemble puff pastry. I'm gonna take that plastic wrap, the same plastic wrap that I used before. We'll wrap that up and we'll stick it back in the fridge. Oh yes.
So what does the folding process actually bring in?
Okay, let me answer that in a second. So I didn't show you this part, but my kitchen is a little bit further from where I actually teach. So what the folding is doing is it is creating those layers, okay? So pâte feuilletée, layers, right? And so that's how we create the lift, okay, when you have a really great puff pastry. And it's also how you create the flakiness and the separation. So for pie dough, an example, okay, so pâte brisée, it is actually the same sort of effect, same sort of principle. So with our dough here, we have really big pieces of butter, okay, and that's what creates the lift because it creates steam in the oven as it melts and separates the dough layers. It's the same with pie dough. So with pie dough, you're never completely working in that butter. You always have little pea-sized pieces, right? So it's kind of a smaller effect of the flakiness, and that's how it happens, okay? And it's all about ratios. So if you guys notice, equal parts butter and flour. Well, for pâte brisée, which is a pie dough, it's half the butter to the flour. There you go.
Okay, well, thank you. And just one more technical question. I think I'm messing it up a little bit here because I'm doing two things at a time. Anyway, so to come back a little bit, it's important to still have those chunks of butter in the dough, right? In the first time. Exactly. So you shouldn't be like working on it too long, right?
No, so you should see that butter actually showing through, and as you're rolling out, it's going to be streaks of butter too. So those are going to start to disappear the more that we fold this. And it's going to become smoother too. So this is why I don't call it a rough puff, because it does actually get really nice and smooth with the second fold, and then bien sûr, the third fold too. So there you go.
Hey, so we had this the two same questions actually from Varuni and from Julie. It's a great question. Did
Yeah.
you speak French before moving to France, or did you learn once you got there?
I spoke very little French when I moved to France. I studied Spanish in school because being in Texas, it makes way more sense, right? And I had no idea that I was going to move to France either. I did one touristy class before I left. I knew où sont les toilettes and bonjour. And that's about it. And then while I was actually in Paris, I took classes at the Sorbonne. So I did 2 semesters there, and then I took classes through the Mairie. So the City Hall in Paris, they offer inexpensive classes, so I did those for a little bit. And then actually when I went home to Dallas, I took classes at the Alliance Française in Dallas, and that was really great too. So I've taken a lot of classes. I'm intermediate level now, and I'm at the level with my French where I do a tutor on a weekly basis, and that works really well for me. But yeah, I had a great experience at the Alliance Française in Dallas, a wonderful teacher, and a really small community of students that we just kept coming back every Saturday for a year, and you really get to know everyone else in the class, and we're actually still in touch, so it's kind of cool.
Hey, well, hello, Alliance Française, Texas. So yeah, everyone is welcome to ask more questions. Actually, we do have like a technical one right now here.
Yeah.
My butter melted, Natasha says. I think it created a ball. I don't see the pieces. What shall I do?
Yes. So that unfortunately is one of those things where you have to be very, very careful. So remember, all throughout the process, we started with really nice and cold butter, right? When we were adding the water, it was cold. It kept that butter cold. We were just tossing those butter pieces, so that they remained cold. And if at any time it becomes hot or warm or starts to melt, becomes sticky, too soft, you want to put it in the fridge, okay? You don't want to rush it. So if I have a really nice cold day in the winter, I actually did this 2 days ago. My kitchen is really, really nice and cold. My butter is really nice and cold, and I'm working through this very quickly. I can do this puff pastry in 15 minutes, start to finish, all of the folds, really nice and fast. And yes, so with the butter melting, that happens when you touch it too much. Your finger is going to warm it up, and the liquid from the melted butter is going to form a ball, right? So the texture will be different. You will still get a dough, but the texture will be crisp and not flaky, okay? Because remember, the key is to have those big pieces of butter in there, okay? So yeah, if you press the butter instead of tossing it, then that can happen because you're kind of kneading it together. Well, it really is just a delicate approach and working pretty fast. Speaking of which, you're welcome, Natasha. Happy to help. Should we do our next fold? So remember, the key to this is to work pretty quickly, okay? So we could have that chill for another, 10, 15, 20 minutes. You can actually go and run errands, go to sleep, right? Have a nap, whatever, and then come back to it. The key is that you want to finish all of your folds within 2 days, okay? So in terms of the position of my dough, I have the open part facing away from me and towards me, okay? And I have this open end, this open part here, okay? It can face to the left or the right. It does not matter, okay? Dough, is it better to use a metal bench scraper to turn the dough rather than use your hands? You're not touching it for so long that it's not going to make a huge difference. Yeah. I like that question though. I've seen that. I like that. It's cool, John. I like it. Okay. So once you have your dough out, the first step we're going to do is we're actually going to do these indentations. So you're going to press, okay? You see I'm just indenting the dough. I'm essentially stapling together those layers, okay? So this is going to keep my dough, as I'm rolling out, from going to the left or the right, okay? It should help keep it nice and straight. And remember, you can always pick up your dough, move it around on your surface so that it's always nice and coated with flour, okay? And notice I don't have a ton of flour, I just have a nice sprinkling. So when you've done those indentations, you're gonna do little rolls on top, okay? Little itty bitty rolls. Essentially, we're just evening off those mountains that we created, the mountains and the valleys. And then press a little bit more firmly, and we're gonna roll this out into a nice long rectangle again. So you can still see those streaks of butter, and you can see that it's getting smoother as well, okay? I have a little bit of butter that showed here on the side, but that's gonna work its way back into the dough when I fold it, so I'm not worried about it. But you can see I have massive amounts of butter here, here, and here. That's gonna make for a great puff pastry. Also, when I was rolling it out, it took, what, 30 seconds? Very fast, okay? So 2 hands long, okay? So always the 2 hands long. It will vary a little bit. I have smaller hands, so. Okay, so if you have a ton of flour on top, go ahead and just kind of brush it off there. That's gonna make sure that those layers stick together really well. And then we're going to move into our double fold. It's also called a book fold, okay? So the bottom's gonna go into the middle, okay? If you have a lot of flour, you're gonna brush it off. Maybe you get really nifty with a flour brush. Everyone by the end of the class is gonna have a flour brush.
Yeah, I started loving it already, yeah.
It's awesome for this process in particular. It's great because it does do a better job than if you do it with your hand. You can also, if you just have a pastry brush, you can use that too, right? You can totally just use a pastry brush. So oftentimes people have maybe that, okay? So into meat in the middle and then fold it on top of itself. And you can see it's already starting to look really nice and smooth as a dough. And we have that puff pastry look too, right?
Amazing. I can see already how it's more elastic and more.
Yeah, it's just from working with it, right? And it's absolutely beautiful. So you guys are learning a really great skill. And you'll find that this puff pastry that you're making yourself is way better than what you're going to purchase in the stores. Okay, I bet Dawn has some comments on that. I bet you, Dawn, it's due to the butter, huh? Yes. He's smiling. All right, we'll put that in the refrigerator.
I always felt so intimidated by this recipe. I felt like
it's not bad, huh?
The most difficult thing you can ever do, but yeah, I'm excited to see the result, and it looks
honestly, it's really not that complicated. Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's, you know, it seems very, very intimidating, especially if you're doing it the traditional way. Yeah, Anina, I love it. But it's really not that complicated. And so, yeah, any other questions about the puff pastry? The second fold, the third fold will be the exact same one. It's called a book fold as well, because if you've ever made your own kind of paper cover around a book, you know, when you're going to school, something like that, it kind of resembles that cover that you would put around it. So there you go. Oh, Catherine, should I show you outside? She says, what sort of town is Versailles like to live in? Is it charming, very expensive? It's less expensive than Paris. Okay, I'll give you guys a look outside. Here we go. It's a little chilly today. It's like 40 degrees. And remember, it's dark. Okay. They start getting dark here about 4:30 today. Here we go. It is very misty today. We actually, so I went into Paris today for a baby shower, and half of the Eiffel Tower was in mist. But this is one of the main roads that goes in and out of Versailles. So at the end of it is the train station that takes you into Paris. So it's Château-Rive-Gauche is the stop. It's about 30 minutes to Eiffel Tower, and then down this street here, where that couple's about to cross the street. So that is where the chateau is. It's about 5 minutes walk to the chateau. If you've ever been to Versailles, you might know this street. It's Rue Satterie. It's fabulous. There's lots of stuff on it. Oh, okay.
You're back.
I did
You're
this
back.
earlier too when I was hanging out. Oh, unstable. Okay. Thanks, Natasha. Unstable internet connection. Apparently, hanging out the window will do that too.
Yeah, thank you so much for showing a little piece of
But
Versailles.
yeah.
And someone is asking, so why Versailles?
Of course.
Oh, hi.
Oh, great question. Great question, Anina. So why Versailles? So actually, when I met Francois, who's my French partner, we talked about moving to Versailles. In probably one of our first dates, we met in Paris, and then he moved to Strasbourg about a month after we met. We did long distance for about a year and a half, and then I moved to live with him for a year. And then his job changed and took us back to Paris, and it was either we live in Paris or we choose one of the suburbs. And like I said, we'd always talked about Versailles, and it is charming. Just as Catherine was saying, it is very charming. There's much more to the town than the chateau. It's nice and clean. The markets are lovely. The architecture is fantastic. It's a great place to live. Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Yes.
I love it.
We have a very important question. Can you use puff pastry to do pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving?
I've got, like, technically you could. I would, it would be very flaky. It would be kind of the most amazing pumpkin pie you've ever made in your life. What I personally would do though is I would cut the butter in half just so it's not so rich with the custard filling and go more so with the pâte brisée. So you could still do the folds with the half quantity of butter in there, and it's still going to be really amazing, but maybe not quite as overwhelmingly buttery. She'll be a little bit better with the custard. Yeah. I love that. That was awesome.
And someone is actually saying that those, you can very easily order a set of those stretchy ball covers. I guess the shower caps, right?
Yeah.
Online, including from Amazon.
Oh, Don's got them. I love
Thank
it.
you.
Or you could probably just use a shower cap. Reuse it over
That
and
would
over
be great. Yes, multitasking. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I have a question actually. If we still have time, right now.
Sure.
So, when you moved to France and started living in France, what were the things you missed from America and from maybe particularly from Texas?
Oh, that's so easy. Okay, well, I have to say my friends and my family, always, of course. But set those aside, right? Tacos. Anina is nodding her head. Several people are nodding their heads, yes. And luckily, there's actually a really great Mexican restaurant in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, which is like a 30-minute drive from where we are. And I try to go on a very regular basis. There are actually several taco places, Mexican restaurants in Paris, but they're all not so good. So I make a lot of my own. When I go home to Texas, I actually get fresh tortillas right before I get on the plane, like a lot. And then I throw them in the freezer when I get here. And I work off of those. I also make my own flour tortillas now. So really easy. Corn tortillas I make occasionally, but Francois really does not like them. I love them. So he likes more sort of the flour tortillas, so we'll do that. And he's probably not your regular Frenchman because he really loves jalapenos and he will eat them out of the jar. I don't even do that, so.
Very high tolerance to spiciness.
Apparently. But it was great. Like on one of our first couple of dates, I started cooking international meals, and obviously I made tacos, and I had to teach him how to hold and eat a taco. It's so fun. Natasha says, can you get chilies in France? Yes, you can. I actually order jalapenos from Germany. Yes, because they don't really grow them easily in France. Like, it's not easily accessible. But I found a hot pepper company in Germany that has a bajillion kinds of peppers. And I even ordered plants. So they sent me plants. And in the mail, it was awesome, and it had already this much grown, and like one little jalapeno on it. It did okay, but I now have a new source for fresh jalapenos. In Paris, it's called Mexicor, and they're fantastic. And they have fresh poblanos and jalapenos. So yes, I love it.
Yes. And so now that you've lived in France for some time, right? When you go back to America, what are the things you realize that you can't live without?
Oh,
The
that I
French
can't live
things you
without?
start missing.
Oh, French things, French things. Okay. I would say like I actually really have grown to love longer meals. I really love that, like sitting around the table. My mom was always really great about that when we were young. We always had family dinners, things like that. Here you have like a 4-hour lunch with family, which we often do on Sundays. So I love that. Really good wine though, and really good cheese, and really good baguettes, because baguettes are very hard to find in the States. And I bring back, I freeze butter before I go home to bring to my family. And I bring like all sorts of little cookies and stuff like that. So yeah, but baguettes are hard, but there are a lot of like new bread places propping up in the US that have some amazing bread. Yeah. So I think it's just like, it's going to happen here pretty soon. Like there's two in Dallas, there's Empire Baking Co. and there's Village Baking that have really fantastic bread. So. Oh, and Nina taught us how to prepare delicious baguettes. Oh my gosh, Nina. It's so
I was about to say yes. And we will repeat it soon, so stay tuned.
That's amazing.
Okay, having a total fangirl moment. Excuse me.
I don't even make my own bread. I'm just like, I just do pastry. So
I will bake baguettes with you anytime, Molly. Anytime.
Yeah, let's do that. That would be so much fun. That would be really cool.
Would love that. My mother-in-law from
so
Toulon is here, and she's witnessing.
Oh my gosh. Okay, cool.
Bonjour. We have
Versailles.
Voilà. Merci.
So now I just need to come to Washington, D.C., and Anina and I can do a little class together. Oh, that'd be so fun.
That would be awesome. Yes. Great, especially considering the prices, like to buy a croissant here in America, it's almost a luxury.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to prices, like it used to be 95 cents or something, at least when I was there. I'm not sure now, but
here it's $1. It's €1.05, or it can be like €1.10, something like that. Yeah. People ask me if I make my own croissant, and I'm like, no. It's so much work. I go to the boulangerie.
So much easier just to go out.
Yeah. Natasha, for newbies, which pastry do you recommend to do after Palmier? So I would do millefeuille after that. Yes.
Are you serious? Do you think?
Yeah.
Wow, I would love to try.
Absolutely. Because you have the base, right? You have the base, which is the puff pastry, okay? And there's a special technique to baking it when you're doing millefeuille. And then you just have to learn pastry cream, which is not that hard. It's not that hard, I promise.
This is fantastic. I will be able to make my own millefeuille soon.
Yeah, seriously. And it's just, when you make it from scratch, it is the flakiest millefeuille you have ever had, because what you get in your pastry shops, they've been sitting around for a while, right? And so it loses some of that flakiness. So if you go to Cyril Lignac, it's so hard for me to say, Cyril Lignac, too many L's all at once. They actually make theirs to order. So there's a lot of places where it's like the high-end pastry, they make them to order, the millefeuille. So this one is like you're making them to order at your own home. So it's pretty awesome. And then Allison said, is it true that French baguettes are made with a flour that we can't get? Well, flour, just like wine and other products, is going to vary all in your country, right? So it doesn't mean that it's a flour that you can't get. It really goes back to the technique. There's a lot of technique with breads. Anina would be able to tell you more than I could. Because here's the thing, in France, pastry is very, very separate from bread. I don't do bread. And so you have pastry, which is your entremet, it's all of your things that are not yeasted. You have your viennoiserie, which is your croissant, your brioche, things like that. And then you have chocolate, you have ice cream, you have bread, you have all these sorts of little divisions. So what I do is pâtisserie. Maybe eventually bread, we'll see. Maybe after I have Anina's class. So my favorite pastry shop in Paris is the one that I used to live down the street from. It's the oldest one in Paris. It's called Stoyer, S-T-O-H-R-E-R. It is the oldest pastry shop in Paris, or considered. I believe it's 1789 is when it was founded. And it is classic. They have gorgeous painted ceiling, a chandelier, and it's just classic and good. They are the ones that founded Baba au Rhum. They're known for their chocolate eclairs. I love their caramel eclairs, and it's just a really great one to go into, and you know everything's going to be delicious. The prices are good. It's classic. There's, you know, no crazy variations to it, and it's just really good. But something else which is really different, which would be really fun to test as well, is called Utopia, U-T-O-P-I-A, and they won Best Boulangerie in France, I believe in 2018, 2019, and it's a combination of Asian and French pastry, and it is very cool. So they have like black sesame eclair, they have stuff with matcha, they have bread with charcoal. It is really fabulous too, so would recommend that one too.
Thank you. Yes.
Absolutely. Should we
And
do our
so,
last? Yeah.
can you
go
tell
ahead.
us more about your book? When was the idea born, and what was it like to write and make this book, and how did you come to the idea of when did you decide to write a book, to publish a book?
I decided to write a book when the publisher reached out to me.
That's the best. Yes.
That's the best response. That was in January 2020. I honestly didn't think I was going to write a book this soon, but they saw what I was doing and they really liked it. And they reached out and they said, whatever you want to write a book on, pitch us some ideas, and let's do it. So I wrote the cookbook in 4 months. I created 60 recipes while I was starting my virtual classes, and during the pandemic as well. It was absolutely nuts, but it was an incredible time as well because I was doing a lot of creating. So I would get into the space, turn on the music, and just take notes and test and test and test. And the cool thing was that I was teaching these virtual classes at the same time. So when I felt like the recipe was really good at its best, I would throw it out there and I would teach it to people. And then I would get their comments back and I could actually see what problems they were having, okay? Or if there's anything that needed more explanation, and all of that made it into the book. So every single recipe has actually been tried by hundreds of bakers all over the world, which is really cool. Not all of them, but all of the base recipes. And so how the book is laid out is each chapter is a base recipe. Because patisserie, that's what it comes back to, is really specific base recipes that have been around for a very long time. For example, pâte à choux has been around since the 1450s with Catherine de Medici's Italian chef that came over. And there's different techniques to do that. There are lots of little tweaks that you can make to the recipe to make it better. And so I really talk about those. And I put forth what I believe is my version of the best recipe for the best pâte à choux, for the best pastry cream. And yeah, just trying to make it easy too, because with an American background, I didn't learn these techniques until later in my life. So I was in my mid-20s. And it's very different than just stirring things in a bowl, but it doesn't mean that it's difficult. So it's just a matter of how you explain it and how you break it down and show those techniques. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, it sounds very intense to write it in 4 months, but at the same time, if you were
Yeah.
testing it on people, that's the best way. Yeah.
It really
Great.
was. It offered this fantastic opportunity and a unique opportunity too. I'm hoping to write another book once I have a breather. I'm going to require that they give me 1 year for that one. But I'm just going to put it out there. I'm really hoping that it can be, and I have to run it by the publisher, obviously, and get their approval, but on Marie Antoinette's dessert. So like go into like the Versailles archives and see. Yeah, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions here. Are the people who take your classes typically French or British American?
American mostly, so 80%. I do have several French people that take my classes, which is really fun. I actually have some people in surrounding neighborhoods that will join. I've never met them. So when I ask like where they're from, they're like, oh yeah, I'm in Rambouillet, which is like 30 minutes drive away. Yeah.
And Anina Bell was asking, did Jamie Beck end up photographing your pastry? She remembers seeing something about that online.
She did not. She has photographed for me in the past, and we are friends. She's amazing. But who photographed my cookbook is Joanne Pye, who is Slice of Pie, and she's incredible too. She's Canadian American, and she's really unbelievable. So I was lucky to have kind of a couple of photographers that I've worked with. Yeah.
Stephanie says that your instructions on technique are great.
Thank you,
And
Stephanie.
someone else is
know
asking
you.
a very important question. How do you keep from eating too much of what you make? Look, smiley. And I love to bake, but I end up eating too much of it, though I try to share the love and sugar and give some to my friends.
Okay, that is like the most difficult thing because when things are really delicious, you want to eat it all. I will say that there is a point where you actually get a little bit tired of it. So that kind of stuff does happening. But no, I do. My neighbors love me. There's a community of English speaking women in Versailles that they have a Facebook group, and I put out a call whenever I have a cake to get rid of. I post a picture, and during the pandemic, it was hilarious. When I was creating the recipes, I would be like, please come take this. I've made this like 6 times. I can't eat it anymore. And I was like, we'll give it to you for butter. I actually had one of my friends, it was a very new friend, I gave her a cake and she was like, I have to do something in return. And she painted Elliot, and it's this incredible portrait. I was expecting this little thing, but she's an amazing artist and she painted Elliot. So it's kind of cool. It's allowed me to like get to know a lot of people in the area. I have a really good friend who she showed up with garlic from her garden when she was picking up a cake, and I was like, you and me, girl, we're gonna be friends.
Wow, I wish you were my neighbor. You're like a perfect neighbor.
I love it. We actually have someone living on the top floor in the Chambre de Bonne, and she loves pastry. She's in her early 20s, and I called her. She was having a party. I think it was her birthday party, and all my classes are late at night, and I had one on tarte tatin. And I called her, and it's like so amazing, fresh out of the oven. And I called her and I was like, would you like this cake? And she was like, oh my God, I thought you were calling me to turn down the music. I was like, no, 10 o'clock at night, would you like a tarte tatin?
Oh my God, this is hilarious. Yeah, but you're also probably torturing her with all the smells.
Probably. It's true. Okay, well, let's do our last fold. And oh my goodness, our dough should be nice and cold now. It should be perfect. Oh yeah. So this is nice and firm. This is going to be lovely. Merci, Joanne. Thanks for coming, Joanna. It's very nice. Okay, so I'm putting it into a long rectangle here. Okay, and again, that open side, it can face to the left or the right, whichever you're feeling. Okay, you just want to make sure that those folded parts are facing towards you and away from you. And like you guys were saying, look how nice and smooth this is. It's a really gorgeous consistency already and texture. So to start, I'm going to make those indentations again. Okay, and really pressing down. And you can see those valleys, right? So just like before, we're gonna even out those mountains and valleys on the top, okay? And just make it flatter so it's easier to work with. So little rolls. I love working with this French rolling pin because it's just really easy to know how much pressure you're applying on whatever dough that you're working with. So I just turned it a 90-degree angle, okay? 90-degree angle, okay? And I'm just widening it a little bit just to make it easier to work with. Okay. And then we're going to do that nice long roll again. Okay. And Natasha's asking, should we cool the dough for 1 hour or so in between the folds? I say a minimum about 15 to 20 minutes is good. Again, if your butter is really nice and cold, you can move through those folds here pretty quickly. Okay. Like I do. Like that'll be like upper level, right? But for the best results, about 15 to 20 minutes minimum. But remember, you can leave this for a longer amount of time. So this dough just needs to be folded and used within 2 days. Okay. So for example, if this morning I made the dough, okay, and then I went to the baby shower, right? And then I came back and I did the first fold. Okay, and then I had dinner, and then I did the second fold, and then I went to sleep, and then in the morning I did the third fold. You see, so you can divide it up however you want, right? There's no set schedule. That's the nice thing about working with non-yeasted doughs is that there's no set schedule, right? So you can, there's nothing that is active that is happening in here. Just a longer chilling time is nice. So we have my dough is curving at the ends. Is that okay? That is just due to how you're rolling it. Okay, so that you can fix that by actually, so I actually had one that was curving a little bit here. You can play with your dough, right? So you can stretch it out to the side if you need to. Okay, so if you need to make those corners a little bit more pronounced, you can. It does not have to be a perfect rectangle ever, but you can pat it too. Okay, so you can play with your dough, right? You can pat it, you can pull a little bit if you need to, right? To kind of even it out. And again, we're just going for 2 hands long. Okay, there you go. Which kind of rolling pin do I recommend? This one, not tapered. I don't know what Anina uses, but this is what I like. What do you use, Anina?
My grandmother's rolling pin from Quebec. It is
that.
75
I have
years
an old one too. I have this one.
Oh, I
Isn't
love
that cute?
it. Is
I have this one too, which is kind of fun. It just has the one handle. Yeah. So this is for pounding dough. Yeah. So you can find a lot of antique rolling pins here. Yeah. Yeah, they're really fun. Okay, guys, let's do this. So top into the middle, bottom down to meet it. Okay, brush off that excess flour, and then fold it in half. And you guys have made puff pastry. Ta-da! So really beautiful, right? And you can see it does not look rough. It looks really nice and smooth, AKA why I do not call it a rough puff pastry. I call it a simple puff pastry because all you need is time and you just need to know how to do those folds. Way to go, Anina. I'm going to show you. You ready? Hold on. Show us again. Yeah! Way to go. Does anyone else want to show theirs off? Ooh, Natasha. Nice. Oh my gosh. Rooney, oh, beautiful. Oh, and here's
Is
Jane.
it too fat? It looks really fat.
It is, so you could just roll it a little bit thinner when you do those folds, and that's okay. So just a little bit longer, and that will help. But it looks fantastic. You guys did an amazing job. Yay.
Yes, it looks great.
So if you guys want to go ahead and chill your dough again for this next part, and I'll just demonstrate really quickly how to do the palmier, okay? And I have some that are already made, so you can see that. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to roll this dough out into a very large rectangle, okay? So imagine that it's the size of a quarter sheet pan, okay? So I have one here so you can kind of see the size, okay? So it is about, I would say 15 inches by 13, if I believe. You're going for very, very thin. So this is a quarter. This is what I use as my baking sheets here because I have a smaller oven and that's what fits. So when you roll your dough really nice and thin, you want to reapply flour as needed. You're going to do those indentations to start, okay? Then you're going to do those, roll out those little valleys. And the key here is to always pick up your dough and move it around, okay? Because as it gets larger, it's going to be eating up all that flour that's on your surface, and that's when it starts to stick. So if you see, I just do a couple of rolls and then turn it. So I'm not even going all the way down to the bottom. And then I'm going to put a little bit of flour on top as I need to. But it's not a lot of flour, right? It's the right amount, right? So moving. I don't know if you guys could hear the music. I feel bad. I can share it if you're interested. Do you want me to share it? I'll share it.
Sure, yeah, we can hear it a little bit.
A little bit? Okay, I'll share it more.
Yes.
I always bake to music because it motivates me. It's nice.
What's your favorite recipe from your book?
My favorite is those tigres that I showed you, but also there's this caramel nut tart. So it's in the caramel section. It is so good. So
that's the one you assemble? That's the one you assemble or not? No.
No, that's not the one that I showed you guys earlier, but it is, it's a combination between, you have caramel tarts that have a base of caramel on the bottom and then chocolate ganache on top. But then you also have caramel tarts that are just caramel and then lots of roasted nuts on top. This is kind of a combination of both of those. So it is a chocolate caramel ganache and then roasted nuts on top. So it kind of balances out that sweetness. It's amazing. It's really delicious.
Is this the one?
Yeah, here, I'll show everyone. Hold on, Natasha. Yes, that one. It's so good. It's so good. It's really great. And every single recipe has instructions for how you can make it in advance, okay? And also how you can, store it, right? That was really important for me. So I'm just adding a lot of sugar on top and on bottom, because this is how you get a really nice, crispy, caramelized palmier, right? So let me show you again the palmier here that I did. So it's really caramelized around the sides. On the inside is that apple butter, okay? And that caramelization, it comes from the sugar, right? So I even just have my can of sugar nearby, my jar of sugar. It's not a can. Can you use brown sugar instead? You could, yeah. You could. You just want to use a finely ground, like a granulated sugar. So you want to use like a raw sugar or cassinade. And I'm just going to roll that in, okay?
And for how long are we chilling the dough? Obviously you were fast forward, right? But people who are chilling it right now, for how long before actually baking palmier?
Yeah, so I would say just until it's cold to the touch, so firm. So it could be, you could wait another 15, 20 minutes. This is the dough that I just did now. So if you're feeling confident with rolling, you can go ahead and roll it out. It's just a little bit easier when it is cold to work with. You're not going to have as much sticking. So I would wait 15, 20 minutes or so, and then you can move forward with this. Yeah. So, or you can do it tomorrow if you feel like it, whatever you're feeling. Essentially, like I said, remember, you just want to use that dough up within 2 days, okay? So you can do palmier just the normal way, the regular, the nature, with just sugar, okay? So it's just a lot of sugar, or if you want to do it the Thanksgiving way, I would say, maybe.
And Belle says, my kids want it now.
Yeah, I know, it's so hard. Or you can use a little bit of jam, or that apple or pumpkin butter would be really fantastic in this. So I just used it straight up, but you can, so if you taste your apple butter and you're like, ooh, I think it needs a little bit of extra cinnamon, so you can add about a teaspoon of cinnamon in there. And mix it in, or that's actually a lot. I would do about a half a teaspoon actually. That's what I sent you guys in the recipe too. But you want a really nice thin layer, okay? This isn't one of those things where if you put a ton of filling in there, it's gonna be better. You want a nice thin layer. And so if you guys see, I'm just eyeballing it. And I'm gonna go all the way up to the edges, and then on the ends, I'm just gonna leave a little bit of a border. Okay.
Arun is asking if she can use, if they can use peach butter.
Sure, you can use any sort of butter. You can use jam. That's really fantastic. A way to change this up is you can actually use seasoned sugars. So if you have like vanilla sugar, that's really great. I have lavender sugar. So I just put lavender buds in a sugar container. Okay, and so it infuses that sugar. That's really lovely. But the key, just like I said, is really an even, thin layer, okay? Now, in terms of folding this or rolling it, there are 2 ways to do it, okay? So some people like to fold it in, and then it looks a little bit more like hearts. I like it when it's the swirl, like you guys saw, okay? I like the swirl instead of the hearts, personally. Elliot, what was that? Elliot. He just made a very weird noise. Hold on. Oh, we're all good. See, this is what you get when you do it live. When I was teaching the class just before this, like Francois had like food delivered, and then Elliot was like barking. So if y'all can see, I'm rolling up really nice and tightly the edges in towards the middle, okay? So I like to start the roll, and then I'm gonna use all 4, well, 5 of my fingers, well, more like 8, I guess. Not my thumbs. To roll it once I get it started. So if you can see, I'm spreading out my fingers and then rolling in towards the middle, okay? And just making sure it's a really nice tight roll. And then from the other side, I'm gonna do the same thing. Okay, so nice tight roll, and then this will go actually in the freezer to firm up before you cut it. Okay, so I have some that I've already rolled up that I'll go grab so you guys can see that. You don't want to keep it in the freezer for too long, so just about 15 to 20 minutes again, and it really is just to firm up that dough, because the sugar will actually start to melt. Okay. So it will still be very good even if the sugar melts, okay? And that's just a natural reaction that will happen. But it's a little bit easier to work with when it's not melted. Okay. So once you have rolled that up, you are going to transfer it into plastic wrap. So this is the one that I've been using this whole time, okay? You could also, for this, you could just put it on a baking sheet and into the freezer. But our goal is to make it nice and firm. So I'll go grab the one I've already made. Okay.
So was it freezer or refrigerator?
Freezer. Yep, freezer for this bit. I know. I like to switch it up on you guys. Make it make it interesting. For how long?
For how long?
15 minutes, not for very long. Yeah, not for very long. So mine was in there obviously for a very long time. That's okay. Okay, so I have a little bit of sugar here. Here's the one that I made earlier that I actually used to make the ones that I showed you. Okay, so this one is frozen, so I won't be able to really show too much with it, but you can see the little swirl in there. This looks fantastic. What you'll do is you'll cut this into centimeter size pieces. So again, it's going to be way easier for you to do this because it will not be frozen solid. Oh no! Frozen solid, not the way to go. But essentially you're going to cut it into pieces, okay? And then you actually dip those into the sugar on both sides. And then you put it on your baking sheet, like so. Okay? And you stick it in the oven. All right, so into the oven at 400 Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. And what you're looking for is this part will start to brown around the top, okay? And that's how you know that it's time to flip it. Okay, so you're gonna flip it over. I just use a spatula that I use for flipping burgers. We don't make a lot of burgers, but. So about 10 minutes, and then once it's nice and brown around the edges, you flip it over. And so that allows that bottom, which is now on the top, to caramelize. Okay, so you leave it in there for another 5 to 10 minutes until it's that nice deep brown color. Okay, if there is some butter that comes out, that is normal. It will go back into your cookies as it continues to bake. It's just dependent on how it was cut. These will last in an airtight container for, I would say, 5 to 7 days, no problem. And if they last that long. Oh, Leslie and Natasha just put it right above your comment there.
400, yes. This looks amazing.
And Natasha, I will send you the absolute, like the exact instructions as well, so you can email those out to everyone, so you have all the temperatures and the times and all of that. But it really is that easy. So you guys saw we really took our time with the puff pastry. And then for rolling it up, it's very easy to do as well. And then it's just a matter of kind of like a slice and bake cookie, right? You just slice it, you put sugar on both sides, dunk, dunk, and then you put it on your sheet pan and you bake it. And then you flip it halfway through, and they're awesome.
Wow. Thank you so much, Molly, for doing this class for Alliance Française. Really, really great.
My pleasure.
And happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Enjoy your holidays. And we hope you will join us later for the rest of our programs. Thank you all so much. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you very much.